What is industry consolidation? This is an environment where a few companies control the supply of goods or services within an industry through mergers and acquisitions. Now, why does this happen? A number of reasons. One is a natural development as technological advancement and expectations are normalized, particularly by the larger companies. They apply pressure for the smaller companies that don't have as many resources to comply with all these new standards. So, for example, in games, when AAA studios show, okay, look at this 8K rock, and all the YouTubers and reviewers show about how you can play the game in 8K and how this blade of grass look realistic and so on. It instills a expectation in their viewers that every other game now must have 8K blades of grass and 12K rocks. So if a lower or if a small studio isn't able to deliver on these expectations, they get marked down for it. So in that case, it's easier, or that's one benefit for the smaller company to sell out to the larger one. Eliminating competition as well. It's a very common reason. One of the more popular ones here would be Disney. Pixar used to be whooping Disney's ass when it comes to animated film. Disney just say, you know what, let's just buy them. And you also have the benefit of, or not benefit, the reason of gaining access to new markets and also greed. So Facebook, back in the early days of the internet, you had MySpace, High5, and Facebook. High5 died out. It was only MySpace and Facebook for a while. Facebook eventually won that. But as Facebook's audience got older, the younger people now did not want to be on the same platform as their parents, jumped to like Instagram and Snapchat. Facebook tried to buy Snapchat, but it failed. But it was able to buy Instagram, and so now it has the older crowd with Facebook, and it has the younger crowd with Instagram. Just because something is naturally occurring or it's a natural development does not mean that it is right or it should be allowed. This is a concept that the progressives have have great difficulty understanding. The more Christian-minded, I think, have a easier time understanding because they start from a place of your natural behavior is flawed. What do you call it? Original sin, I think, right? That basically you're born flawed. So they are used to the idea of you having to work to overcome your flaws and become better, right? You deny some of your natural inclinations in order for a better outcome. The progressive types don't do that. They're lazy bastards. They think that you are perfect as you are. When you suit them, anyway. And that does lead to a whole lot of problems, but that's not the point for this particular video. So what are some of the pros and the cons of industry consolidation? Because if it yields more benefits than downside, then it's something that should be supported. If the reverse is true, then it's something that should be halted. If you consolidate a bunch of companies, you'll be better able to streamline and allocate resources. And this should allow for cost cutting and a boost in revenue. However, this savings is not passed on to the consumer. So this is completely unimportant for us in terms of whether or not consolidation in the game industry is something beneficial to the consumer. One example is of savings not being passed on to us is Unreal Engine. Every Unreal Engine, but in particular 4 and 5, they kept talking about how it's easier than ever to make high quality games with Nanite and Lumen. You can just drop in this thing and it looks like photorealistic movie. They kept talking about how easy it is. But when it comes time to pay them for the game, they raise the prices for the game. And their argument is, oh, it is so much more difficult to make these high fidelity games. Well, which one is it? Does Unreal Engine 5 make it easier than ever, or is it more difficult than ever? But this is just an example of the savings not being passed on to us. The games are getting cheaper, they're getting more expensive. Well, yeah, the price of games haven't been keeping up with inflation, right? So that aspect is true, but the market has increased. All right. So what are some of the other benefits here now? Well, the smaller studios will have access to technology and funds and personnel, and should have a more relaxed timeline that they otherwise would not have. And this should result in a higher quality product. However, the corporate mandates can negate all of these benefits. We can look at the game as defect androgynous.
All right, what happened?
To who?
To whom? And your goddamn father.
Sorry, my face is tired from dealing with everything.
For this, this is after EA bought BioWare, and so they have more. They should have more access to more money and engine and so on. But EA mandated that they use. So yes, that game was woke, and so even if it wasn't technically broken, it would still be a failure of a game. But taking that aside, from the technological standpoint, they had to use, or they had to co-opt on what EA Frostbite, and try to rework it into an engine that would fit an open, quasi open world RPG thing. And apparently that gave them a lot of headache. So the corporate mandate undid, and as a matter of fact, it was even more detrimental, because if they weren't allied with EA, then they would have either created their own or went in search of an engine that is more suited for the task. So what are some of the cons then of consolidation? Well, you have the cultures. The clash of cultures have been a problem. There are some that may be more hierarchical, and if that type of culture meets with this loose, everybody do whatever type thing, then you can run into some conflict there, and conflict will result in project mismanagement, lower productivity, and a low quality product in the end. You also have redundant positions. There's no need to have 5 HR departments if you merge in 5 companies. Maybe just 3 will do, so you can fire 2 if you can't reallocate them. Now, while that is unfortunate, that still has nothing to do with the end product inherently. So it is still relevant to the question of whether or not consolidation to the game industry is beneficial to us as consumers. Now, the biggest con is something that is fairly recent, and this is corporatocracy. One of the biggest examples of this would be Disney. That Disney is out there challenging the local government of Florida on policies. Who ever heard of this madness? The most other companies will do is throw a tantrum like little children and say, well, if I can't mutilate children, then I'm going to take my toys and leave. Like, that's typically what companies do. But Disney Florida said, no, we're going to lobby and act as politicians to change your laws. No. So in this case, the corporation, the companies are being involved in governance. And here's another problem. If one company owns all the games and that company goes woke, then there's no alternative. There's no alternative. And you see, the wokeists don't understand that this is a double-edged sword. Yes, right now you may have control over the culture, but what happens in 20, 30 years, there's a shift and things go back to a more right or conservative or traditional philosophy. And you already have this corporatocracy in place, right? So what if, for example, these Microsoft owns all the game studios, and someone like me becomes the head of Microsoft? I can tell you right now, from that point, there will be no alphabet in any game as long as I'm head. Would you like that? Highly doubt it. So you are creating a situation you're okay with now because it suits you, but you are creating a situation where if someone who you disagree with enters into that same power structure, you would not like the world that you have created. But this is the danger when you have this amount of consolidation. There are no alternatives. So it's fine to have things that I disagree with, as long as it's fringe and somewhere over there. It's not in every single thing. Now, granted, there are other factors at play rather than just consolidation, because you have the ESG score I just learned about that is truly diabolical. But right now, we're just talking about the inherent risks of consolidation. And lastly, you also have to run into the problem of stagnation. It's linked to no alternatives. So one of the best examples I can use for this is the GPU situation this generation, the RTX 4000 series and the RX 7000 series. For the longest while, we only have a two-party system in GPU, NVIDIA and AMD. Different from back in the 90s where, and 80s I guess, where you have far more companies. But right now, for the longest while, it was just two. Just now, Intel jumping in and trying to create a fatal three-way. But look at what happened this generation. NVIDIA raised the prices of the 40 RTX 40 series massively. And by the way, we've been overpaying for NVIDIA GPUs ever since the GTX 10,000 series. 10,000 GFX 1000 series. The problem is that these so-called learned individuals, YouTubers, experienced professionals, they kept giving NVIDIA a pass and a pass and a pass. Every generation, the price raised $50, $100, well, not quite $100, $50 above what it should cost, adjusted for inflation. So you're just paying more. They made a little bit of an outcry in the RTX 2000 RTX 20 series, and then when the 30 series came around and it was also overpriced, but just not as overpriced as the 20 series, they championed that has been a good value. And then now they have a surprise Pikachu face that Nvidia said, okay, so let us just try to push the needle a little bit further again. Well, that being said, right, Nvidia massively upcharged the 40 series. So people pinned their hope on AMD, myself included, I'll be honest. And what did AMD do? They said, all right, rather than try to take market share, we're simply going to match your prices. So since you overcharge on your cards, we are also going to overcharge on our cards. And you have the situation now where this generation, it makes absolutely no sense to buy a computer, a GPU, I should say, a current generation GPU. None whatsoever. Not the 4090, not the 4080, not the 4070, not the RX 7900X, none of them. Waste of money. For gamers, if you are industry professional and you're using GPU to make money, you can view that as a necessary evil, as an investment. But if all you're doing is just playing games on the weekend, utter waste of money. So the same thing can happen now when you have a bunch of, or there's no more competition. Imagine if there's no more competition between Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and Guilty Gear. Let's say all of them owned by the same company. Right? It's like, okay, well, there's no need to really innovate and create something new, because if you want a fighting game, then you have to buy fighting game from, let's say, Microsoft. Right? Microsoft doesn't have to worry about Sony creating their own fighter. So in my mind, there are far more downsides in the games industry being consolidated than their upside. And so I think that we should stop this as quickly as possible. By we as gamers don't really have that much power still. Well, I shouldn't say that. The power we have, not many are willing to wield, because we can just simply not buy the games and state a reason for not buying the games, right? So we could just simply do that. But the last Street Fighter 6 video I made showed that there are a lot of people who just are too weak, and they be it nostalgia or whatever, they just can't help themselves, and they will just still buy the thing, that even if they disagree with it, they will just still buy it. So from that perspective, realistically, there's not much we can do, unless it's some fringe case where with Bud Light, people just decide that one day this is enough. Which is funny, because Bud Light has been warped before. They were the ones that had this weird ad with Seth Rogen and this other, what's her name, Sarah Silverman, I think. like they made it clear what their views were, but somehow that was fine, and this was the final straw. But I suppose that's why it's a last straw, right? You bring everything and just this last one tip it over. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble now. So those are my thoughts. I don't think that the consolidation in the game industry is a good thing, and I think that it would be in our best interest as consumers if this was stopped and not allowed to run its natural course.